Everyone in Gleaston knew how hopelessly in love Ariana Torrey was with Brian Lodge. She loved him to the extent of abandoning all of her pride and principles that on the day they were supposed to get married, Brian left Ariana behind and drove their bridal car to the airport to pick up Evelyn Granger, the person he truly loved. With just a word from the latter, the wedding Ariana had hoped for after waiting for at least 3 years turned into a nightmare that would scar her forever. Ariana was abducted by Brian's enemy on the day of their wedding. These men tormented Ariana for 3 whole days to humiliate Brian, and in the end, Ariana was stripped naked and tied onto a pole on the deck. The abductors live streamed what they did to Ariana live since they thought this was the perfect way to get back at Brian. Ariana shuddered as the sea breeze swept through her. She had cried and begged the abductors to let her go. Her pride was constantly trampled over by these men. Meanwhile, Brian was completely unaffected as he and Evelyn got their marriage certificate that day. Brian Lodge, pay us a ransom of $5 million, and we'll release your fiancée. Otherwise, we'll throw her into the ocean to feed the sharks. One of the abductors gave Brian the ultimatum while speaking in a scornful tone. Yet, the response to his demand was a mere scoff. What does it have to do with me whether a defiled woman like her dies or not? Ariana froze when she heard what Brian said. A defiled woman? She repeated inwardly. Ariana never imagined she would one day hear Brian say something like that. All these years, she had not once engaged in any physical relations with anyone because everyone knew how Brian was germophobic. For the past 3 years, Ariana had been docile and obedient whenever she was with Brian. She was even willing to give up her own life if Brian had asked her to. Ariana thought Brian would at the very least feel sorry for her. Yet, she never expected that. That was how Brian saw her after Brian hung up. The abductor was so infuriated that he immediately ordered his men to toss Ariana into the ocean. Suddenly, Ariana felt like she had made a complete fool of herself. The entire city knew that she was just a replacement for Evelyn. Ariana had forsaken the identity she took pride in and willingly became a substitute for someone else just so she could marry Brian. Despite how others gossiped about her, Ariana took great care of Brian's grandmother, Belinda Mackle, and centered her life around Brian. She spent 3 years doing that. This time, Ariana thought that she had finally managed to get Brian to open up to her. Yet, she never expected that. All of her efforts were for naught. Ariana closed her eyes in despair. She cried tears of regret and resentment that if she had the chance to do this all over again, Ariana would stay as far away as possible from Brian and never try to approach him. No way. She really jumped into the water? That's nuts. Did she really have to stoop so low to please him? So what if it was Mr. Lodge's ring? She actually went into the pool to pick it up. Everyone knows how desperate Ariana Torrey is to get Mr. Lodge's attention. Diving into the pool is nothing. I'm sure she won't say no even if Mr. Lodge tells her to strip herself and dance here right in front of everyone. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Ariana felt like she was about to suffocate, and it made her feel lightheaded. She could also hear the sounds of men laughing derisively with excitement. Cough, cough. Shortly afterward, Ariana managed somehow to push her face above the surface of the water. When she saw the sight before her, Ariana was momentarily stunned since she could not understand what was going on. Those standing next to the pool were all guests who were amused by what Ariana was doing. On the other hand, Ariana's gown was completely soaked. All of this felt very familiar to Ariana. This was Ariana and Brian's engagement party that was held 3 years ago. Could it be? Have I been reborn? She pondered. Ariana was instantly reminded of her previous life where Brian assumed she had coaxed Belinda into holding the engagement party as soon as possible since she wanted to marry into the Lodge family. So, Brian decided to humiliate Ariana during the engagement party. Ariana could still vividly remember how Brian had tossed his engagement ring into the pool and snickered. I'll marry you if you manage to retrieve that ring. Ariana thought Brian actually meant those words. She jumped into the pool even though she could not swim. Ariana had almost drowned herself back then. Eventually, she retrieved the ring and climbed out of the pool in a drenched, miserable state. Yet, Ariana once again suffered great humiliation because of Brian at the party. Brian was extremely worried because Evelyn had committed self-harm. He left halfway through the party without showing Ariana any hint of respect or consideration, making her a laughingstock in Gleaston. Ariana looked down at the ring she gripped tightly in her hand. She could not help but smile wryly. Ariana Tori, was that what you really wanted? She pondered. All eyes were on her when Ariana climbed out of the pool. You've managed to find the ring even though the pool is so deep. You should hurry and show it to Mr. Lodge right away. That's right. Without it, Mr. Lodge might even call off the engagement. The sound of mocking laughter had yet to cease at that point. It was because all these people thought that Ariana was a complete fool. Despite these people's mockery and ridicule, Ariana simply took off the engagement ring on her finger expressionlessly and tossed it into the pool, along with Brian's ring. The laughter died down instantly following a soft plop into the water. After Ariana walked away, several people scoffed. What's she throwing a tantrum for? She would still go into the pool obediently to pick up the rings if Mr. Lodge threatened to not proceed with the engagement. Exactly. Everyone knows the person Mr. Lodge loves is Miss Granger. Ariana Tori? She's just a shameless lady who keeps throwing herself at Mr. Lodge when he doesn't even like her. If it weren't because Mrs. Lodge Sr. liked her, would Mr. Lodge even spare her a glance? People were whispering and pointing at Ariana discreetly. Meanwhile, Ariana, who was soaked through, had headed back inside the banquet hall. Her stepmother, Gwen Lambert, hurried over and caught up with her. Ariana Tori, where have you been? How did you end up looking like this? It's your engagement party today. Hurry and go somewhere you can dry your dress. Also, we can't have you dressed so conservatively. Men like it more if a lady is a little sexy. Gwen yanked at the collar of Ariana's gown until her cleavage was showing. Then, she nodded with satisfaction. Ariana paid no mind to what Gwen was doing or saying. Her gaze drifted across the hall, which was overflowing with guests. The lights in the hall were slightly dimmed, and everyone seemed to be trying to talk to a certain man. Brian was dressed in a black suit. He had a frigid look on his perfectly chiseled face. Those deep-set eyes seemed to not carry any warmth in them. The man gave off an intimidating aura. Below those eyes, Brian had a tall nose and thin lips. It was as though his face was the heaven's greatest work of art. Men are mostly beings that are dominated by their carnal desires. You're officially Mr. Lodge's fiancée starting tomorrow. You need to please him and try to conceive his child as soon as possible so that he'll marry you for the child's sake. You'll enjoy a life of luxury and extravagance once you become Mrs. Lodge. Gwen got more and more excited while saying that. It was as though the person who was getting engaged to Brian that day was her. A life of luxury and extravagance. Ariana scoffed inwardly. During her previous life, Ariana spent 3 years doing everything she could to show Brian her feelings for him were sincere. Yet what Ariana got in return was her being abducted on the day of her wedding. The abductors even tormented her for 3 whole days. On the first day after she was abducted, Ariana kept praying for Brian to show up and save her. Unfortunately, she had no idea that Brian never planned on marrying her since the beginning. Instead, he drove their bridal car to the airport to pick up Evelyn, who had just returned to the country. On that very day, Brian and Evelyn exchanged their wedding rings and vowed to spend the rest of their lives together at the venue that was originally reserved for Ariana and Brian's wedding. Ariana had waited pointlessly for all these years. In the end, it turned out Brian had prepared the wedding with Evelyn in mind. On the second day, Brian told others that Ariana had run away from the wedding. He showed no concern over the matters of Ariana's life and death. Although he knew she had been abducted, Brian only cared about spending time with Evelyn. On the third day, Brian refused to pay the ransom. He also refused to be connected to Ariana in any way anymore as he and Evelyn went and completed the wedding registration that day. Ariana felt as though she had spent 3 days in hell. Her heart was filled with hope at first. Gradually, her hope diminished and vanished entirely. Back to the present, they were having her and Brian's engagement party today. Whether it was her makeup or outfit, Ariana had picked the exact same style Evelyn would usually go for. Everyone in Gleaston knew that Evelyn was Brian's one true love and Ariana was just a cheap replacement. Ariana could still remember how Brian had looked at her with barely disguised contempt when she went up to him in her current outfit. He said, "You're just a poor imitation of the real thing. Eve would never look this slutty." Evelyn's parents had passed away early on. She and Brian were childhood friends who grew up together. At some point, the Grangers stopped providing the Lodges their support as there was increased tension between the two families. Moreover, Belinda did not like Evelyn that much. If it were not for these reasons, Brian would have married Evelyn a long time ago. Brian preferred someone pure and demure like Evelyn. Coincidentally, Ariana bore some resemblance to Evelyn. Therefore, Gwen kept making Ariana dress up by imitating Evelyn's style to gain Brian's attention. Ariana had stuck by Brian's side for 3 long months. The whole city knew about how she was brazenly doing all sorts of things just to marry into the Lodge family. Yet, Brian acted as if he was totally oblivious to it, with Belinda showing more favor for Ariana. Brian eventually agreed to get engaged to her since Belinda kept urging him to. However, the humiliation Ariana had suffered during the engagement party and how Brian had left her here all by herself because of Evelyn. On top of that, there was the fact that Brian had used Ariana for 3 years only to ruthlessly discard her in the end. All those things were like knives to Ariana's heart. When she thought about the tragic end she had in her past life, the only thing Ariana wanted to do now was to let Brian go. Since Brian liked Evelyn, Ariana decided she should just back off. "Miss Lambert, I'd like to speak to Mr. Lodge alone for a moment." A faint smile hung on Ariana's face. Gwen soon lowered her guard since Ariana seemed like the usual docile child she was. She approved of it instantly since Ariana was asking to speak to Brian. Of course. We'll become a family soon after all." Gwen was grinning from ear to ear. She immediately loosened her grip on the collar of Ariana's gown, which she was helping to adjust. Then, Ariana walked over to where Brian was. Brian did not turn his gaze to Ariana. His bodyguard tactfully blocked Ariana's path. "Miss Tori, Mr. Lodge is a little busy. I'm afraid he won't be able to see you now," Ariana replied. "I have something important to talk to him about. Mr. Lodge has to greet the guests. I'm afraid he's not free." There was a flash of annoyance in the bodyguard's eyes. Ariana noticed the bodyguard's attitude toward her. It was understandable. At the moment, people knew her as a woman who only had eyes for Brian and kept following him around. Brian must have grown extremely annoyed with her. Otherwise, his bodyguard could not possibly dare speak to Ariana in this manner. "Brian and I will be officially engaged after tonight. Have you not thought about the consequences of speaking to the future Mrs. Lodge in that manner?" The bodyguard found it absurd for Ariana to consider herself the future Mrs. Lodge. "Miss Tori, what we're having here today is an engagement party. Even if it's a wedding ceremony, I have to carry out my duties as per instructions. Mr. Lodge is not free if he says he's not free. I think you should not waste your energy and just head back to your seat. Please don't cause us more trouble." "'Cause them trouble? So, Brian has always considered me a trouble," Ariana pondered. "What if I insist on seeing him now? Miss Tori, must you cause a scene and make a fool of yourself now?" For the past 3 months, Ariana had made every desperate attempt to pursue Brian. She would have breakfast delivered to Brian's office in the morning, but Brian would toss the food away without even checking its content. In the afternoon, Ariana would try to visit Brian at his company. Yet, Brian had not once let her into his office. Ariana would even wait for Brian to get off work outside the office building in the evening. However, Brian would rather work overtime than see Ariana's face for once. Brian's subordinates, who were perceptive enough, could obviously tell that Brian despised Ariana. Yet, Ariana seemed completely oblivious to the reality of her situation. There was no way someone like her would become the future Mrs. Lodge. Even today's engagement party was held because Belinda had pressured Brian into doing it. For the bodyguard and his colleagues, Evelyn was the only person they had acknowledged as the future Mrs. Lodge. The bodyguard thought that Ariana would just accept being brushed off again like the pushover she had always been since she fell silent. He said, "I'll have to escort you away by force if you don't leave now, Miss Tori." Ariana would lose face if she were to be escorted away by force during the engagement party. Usually, Ariana would walk away quietly after hearing that. However, she snickered this time. Are all the bodyguards working for Brian this rude and ill-mannered? The bodyguard was momentarily stunned. "I may not be the official Mrs. Lodge yet, but I am a lady of the Tori family. Even Brian Lodge wouldn't dare stand before me and speak to me like that. Yet you, a mere bodyguard, threaten to escort me away by force? I'm impressed by the way the Lodges do things." The bodyguard's expression hardened. Even though Ariana had not married into the Lodge family, she was indeed the lady of the Tori family. "Miss Tori, that's not what I meant." The bodyguard's smile faltered. Even his attitude was less severe and critical. Ariana had not once spoken to them in a harsh tone since she wanted to maintain a gentle image in front of Brian. The bodyguard never expected Ariana, who used to be a pushover, to have such a sharp tongue today. It seems the lodges aren't that sincere about becoming in-laws with the Tories. We should just call off the engagement then. As soon as she said that, Ariana heard the sound of someone clapping their hands. She had no idea how long the man had been listening to their conversation. When Brian came up to her, he cast a glance at Ariana's empty hands. Then, he said in a mocking tone, "Ariana Tori, are you finally going to stop pretending?" He thought that Ariana would actually dive into the pool to retrieve the ring. Yet, it turned out she was only pretending to. For the last 3 months, Ariana had been acting like a pure, innocent lady in front of Brian when she was deep down a rude and arrogant person. Brian felt like he had learned a new side of her after listening to her words from earlier. Ariana fixed her gaze on Brian. This time, she did not miss the look of scorn and disgust in Brian's eyes. In her previous life, Ariana had foolishly given her heart to Brian for him. She tried her best to learn how to become a good wife and a good mother. Ariana also did everything she could to help with his company's affairs. In addition, she even helped with taking care of Belinda. Ariana thought she could win Brian's heart by doing all those things. Yet, she got abducted by Brian's enemy on her wedding day. Brian had even refused to pay $5 million for the ransom. She could not help but find it amusing. Ariana had worked really hard to become the next Mrs. Lodge. However, all of her efforts turned out to be solely for her own satisfaction. Ariana beamed at Brian. "That's right. I can't keep on with the pretense anymore. Let's break off the engagement. We're both quite busy after all." Ariana had just finished saying that when Brian's secretary, Emily Weston, suddenly came running to him. Brian had always maintained his composure no matter what kind of issue he ran into. He did not react much even when Ariana asked to break off the engagement just now. Yet, Brian's eyes bulged and he had an anxious look on his face at the moment. Ariana could tell that the news of Evelyn committing self-harm had just reached him. When she saw that he was about to leave, Ariana moved to block Brian's path. "Mr. Lodge, we're not done talking yet. Get out of the way." There was a hint of anger in Brian's cold voice. He saw the woman before him as a mere tool to appease Belinda and other members of the Lodge family. Brian did not harbor any special feelings for her. He could marry Ariana. However, he would not let her off if something bad were to happen to Evelyn today. Ariana had no intention of stepping aside. She asked, "You seem to be in a hurry, Mr. Lodge. Are you leaving to see Miss Granger?" Brian did not even try to hide the scorn in his voice. "You think? Eve was driven to commit self-harm because of all of you. I'm warning you. I can offer you the position as the next Mrs. Lodge, but don't even think about gaining anything else." Ariana could not help finding it ridiculous as she listened to those words. She had not done anything to harm Evelyn or anybody. Instead, it was Brian and Evelyn who had caused her a lot of hurt and pain. Ariana even ended up being sacrificed for their great love. She raised her voice and said, "Brian Lodge, we're having our engagement party today. If you insist on leaving to see Evelyn, I'm calling off the engagement then." Ariana's voice was not exactly that loud, but the guests around them could hear her clearly. There were bright flashes of light as the reporters pointed their cameras at the pair and snapped away. Brian narrowed his eyes. "You're using that to threaten me? Ariana, you seem to think too highly of yourself." He walked past Ariana right after saying that. Brian was certain Ariana would not have the courage to break off the engagement with him. After Brian left, Ariana walked up to the stage calmly. She looked at the guests and smiled softly. "Today, Mr. Lodge has shown his reluctance to proceed with our engagement because of Miss Granger. I, Ariana Tori, am willing to give my blessings to the couple. From now on, Brian Lodge and I will no longer be related in any way. The two of us are free to see or marry whomever we want." Gwen, who was chatting away happily with the other ladies, was flabbergasted. She dropped her glass of champagne on the floor. "What? They're calling off the engagement? Has Ariana gone mad?" Gwen screamed internally. Meanwhile, in the car, "Mr. Lodge, Miss Tori says she's calling off the engagement. If she's serious about it, how are we going to explain it to Mrs. Lodge Sr.? She's calling off the engagement." Brian snickered inwardly. The Tories wanted nothing but to help Ariana marry into the Lodge family. Ariana would even copy and dress up in Evelyn's style just to please him. Now that they had achieved their goal, Brian believed there was no way Ariana would want to break off the engagement. Moreover, the Tories would not allow her to do such an absurd thing. Tell Mrs. Tory to warn Ariana not to play these tricks with me. There are others who want the position as Mrs. Lodge if she's not interested in it. Brian would not have been in such a rush to get engaged if it were not because Belinda wanted to see him get a wife as soon as possible. Mr. Lodge, in that case, are you really not going to proceed with the engagement? Brian replied monotonously, I still have use for the Tory family. I'm going through with the engagement regardless. Then just now. I'm going through with the engagement, but I also need to make sure the Tories know their place too. Should we send someone to explain to Miss Tory then?
No.
There was a flash of contempt and annoyance in Brian's eyes when Ariana was brought up again. Anyway, she's going to come to me to admit her mistakes within the day. I've already gotten tired of her using this trick. For the past 3 months, Ariana had been doing everything she could to gain Brian's favor. Not only did she find out all of his likes and dislikes, but Ariana had also gotten detailed information about Brian's daily schedule. Moreover, she would often visit Belinda and spend time with her to win her approval. Brian found what Ariana did utterly revolting. If it were not because of how Belinda had taken a liking to Ariana and the fact that the Tory family could be useful to him, Brian would not have chosen to be engaged to a woman like her. Ariana had tried to play hard to get during the engagement party this time, but Brian was not going to just tolerate it. In the evening, Ariana had just gotten out of the car after arriving at the Tory residence. The car Gwen was in pulled up behind hers almost simultaneously. Gwen started yelling the moment she got out of her car. Ariana Tory, have you lost your mind? You told everyone during such a public event that the engagement was called off? Have you gone nuts? Ariana ignored her. She headed into the house while taking off her accessories. Martha Jenkins asked curiously when she saw that Ariana had returned home early. Miss Tory? Aren't you and Mr. Lodge celebrating your engagement party tonight? How come you're back so soon? Ariana ignored her as well. She went straight into her dressing room. Ariana yanked the pearl necklace off her neck and took off the gown she was wearing. Then, she threw all of the clothes in her closet that were purchased according to Evelyn's style into a cardboard box. Miss Tory, what are you doing? Martha was flabbergasted. Ariana glanced at the row of perfume bottles lined up on a rack in the dressing room. Those were all fragrances Evelyn once liked wearing. With a loud crash, Ariana swept all of the perfume bottles onto the floor, shattering them to pieces instantly. Martha was completely taken aback by Ariana's actions. Mrs. Jenkins, please let me through. Ariana's cold voice rang in Martha's ears. Before she could even react, Ariana had carried the cardboard box and went downstairs to the Tory residence's backyard. Ariana poured the contents of the cardboard box into a huge steel drum. A fire burned fiercely in the drum once Ariana had doused the items with gasoline and tossed a lighted lighter in. There was an icy look in her eyes as she stared at the roaring fire. The heavens gave her a chance to start all over again. This time, Ariana refused to be a substitute for Evelyn. The thought of that. Ariana took her phone out and dialed her close friend, Selena Lovegood's number. Selena, I'd like to request the newspaper agency owned by your family to help me with writing a news article. One that will go viral on the internet within an hour. I'll pay for their services. Huh, aren't you getting engaged to Brian Lodge tonight? You don't have to let the whole country know about your engagement just because you're so excited about it. Right? I'm regretting it now. Regretting what? You're regretting not having told everyone sooner that the two of you are getting engaged. I mean, I'm breaking off the engagement. You're breaking off the engagement? Stop pulling my leg. Anyone else might want to do that, but not you. We're talking about the Brian Lodge you've been longing for and trying so hard to please for 3 months. Selena finally realized the severity of the situation when she did not get a response to her remarks. You're being serious. The next day, the news of the lady of the Tory family calling off her engagement on the day they were announcing it went viral on the internet. This hot topic sparked numerous discussions among the online community. Almost the entirety of Gleaston knew Ariana had fallen head over heels for Brian. Yet, Ariana had suddenly changed her mind and decided to call it off on the day they were getting engaged. The engagement party hosted by the Lodge family and the Tory family turned into an utter joke, especially with the Lodges being put in an awkward, embarrassing position. Ariana Tory from the Tory family reveals that Brian Lodge, the CEO of Lodge Company, has sexual dysfunction. She's decided to break off the engagement since she's concerned about the potential issues and disagreement that may arise in their marital life. She feels sorry for the Lodges but hopes to have their understanding. Inside a private room of a club, Isaac Schofield stared at his phone and grinned broadly. Is this for real, Brian? You have sexual dysfunction? How come I didn't know about that? Hurry and take off your pants so I can take a look. Isaac reached his hand toward Brian's pants, but Brian slapped his hand away. He had a dark look on his face. Which newspaper agency released the article? Which agency? It's the one owned by the Lovegood family. You have no idea how many platforms the Lovegoods have released this article on. Rumor has it that they've printed 100,000 copies of newspapers with this article as the headline. The entire online community now knows that the CEO of Lodge Company has issues in that regard. It's become the #1 topic trending online. Do you want to check it out yourself? Isaac showed his phone screen to Brian mischievously. Brian's expression darkened even more. He gripped the glass in his hand tightly. His eyes reflected a menacing light. Ariana Torrey did this? Isn't that a given? Ariana and Selena Lovegood are best friends who grew up together. Have you done something to upset Ariana? Otherwise, why would she spread this rumor about you on the internet when she's so obsessed with you? Just then, Emily entered the room and began a little hesitantly. Mr. Lodge. With a grim look on his face, Brian asked, have you checked? Where's Ariana Torrey? Seems she's in the room next door. In the room next door, Selena had finished 3 bottles of liquor and was singing a song at the top of her voice. Ariana noticed something strange with the news online as she scrolled through them. She tugged at Selena's sleeve. When have I ever said that Brian Lodge has sexual dysfunction? Ha! I wrote that. Since it's a news article, it needs to be shocking to catch the reader's attention. Ariana's expression hardened. Have you thought about the consequences, though? Selena's cheeks were flushed. She held the microphone and shouted, consequences? What consequences would there be? It's not like Brian Lodge is going to hold a knife to my neck and force me to take down all the news on the internet. Bang! Suddenly, someone kicked the door open. The song that was playing in the room came to an abrupt stop. Did Ariana's heart missed a beat when she saw a stony-faced Brian standing at the door. She knew he would come looking for her, but Ariana never expected him to show up so quickly. Did you release the news article? Brian's voice was cold and monotonous. Selena hid behind Ariana in fear. Ariana tried to maintain her composure. I did. It was you. Brian scoffed. He strode forward and grabbed hold of Selena's arm. Then, he pushed her toward Isaac. Get out. Selena's legs had gone limp the moment she spotted Brian. She tried to rush back to Ariana's side to help her, but Isaac quickly dragged her out of the room. We're going. We're leaving right away. As he closed the door behind him, Ariana and Brian were the only ones left in the room. Brian stepped closer toward Ariana and said frigidly, you broke off the engagement last night and came to a club to have fun the next day. I underestimated you, Ariana. When Ariana looked at Brian, what came into her mind were the ugly faces of the abductors who forced themselves onto her in her previous life. It made her stomach turn. Ariana subconsciously took a step back. Mr. Lodge, you've left me behind during the engagement party to see Evelyn. Also, the Torrey family couldn't possibly become in-laws with the Lodge family with your social status being much higher than ours. Let's just call off the engagement and end things amicably. End things amicably? Brian repeated inwardly. He snickered. The way you end things amicably is by slandering me on the internet? That was an accident. Ariana, I'll admit the way you're trying to get my attention is quite unique. However, I've warned you before to stop playing tricks with me. Brian had Ariana pressed against the wall. There was a fierce look in his eyes. Ariana directed her gaze to her wrist, which was held in Brian's iron grip. She suddenly recalled what happened in her previous life on this day, the day after the engagement party. Belinda had told Brian to send Ariana home. Yet, he left her somewhere along the way to brace the cold wind alone. Brian said monotonously, I've only gotten engaged to you because I have use for the Torrey family. There's not a chance I'll fall for you, Ariana Torrey. As she had flashbacks of her previous life, Ariana yanked her hand free and threw a slap across Brian's left cheek forcefully. Slap! The loud noise was amplified several times by the microphone nearby. Isaac and Selena, who were waiting outside, pushed the door open immediately. Ariana, are you all right? Brian, you're in the wrong this time. You shouldn't have hit a lady no matter how angry you were. Isaac and Selena hurried over to the pair. To their surprise, they found that the person who was struck speechless was Brian instead of Ariana. Ariana said icily, Brian Lodge, do you not understand what I'm saying? The Lodge family isn't the only one who can call off the engagement. It's happening if I say so. Why you? Brian was burning with rage. As he lifted his gaze, he noticed there was barely disguised contempt in Ariana's eyes. Brian was momentarily stunned. Ariana had not once looked at him this way. It was as though this woman, who had tried so eagerly to earn his favor and affection previously, had changed overnight. Let's go, Selena. As if looking at him would make her gag, Ariana walked away without sparing Brian another glance. Selena did not fully understand what had happened since she was quite tipsy. Yet, Isaac was feeling even more confused than she was. He could not fathom how he was seeing things when he had not had a drop of liquor. Ariana, who would speak to Brian softly just like how the caring and gentle Evelyn would, actually hit him? What's more, she had hit Brian's face. Isaac pondered. Brian Lodge. Isaac waved his hand before Brian's face. Did she hit him so hard that it gave him a concussion? Brian seemed like he had not recovered from being slapped earlier. With a frown on his forehead, he pointed at the door. She dared to hit me? Yeah, she did. I can still see the red marks on your face. Brian's face darkened as he remembered those final remarks Ariana made so confidently earlier. Brian chuckled sinisterly. Tell the Tory family that I'm not calling off the engagement just because Ariana wants it. The next day at the Tory residence. What? He's not calling off the engagement. Ariana, who sat on a couch in the living room, furrowed her brows. Brian hated her to the core in her previous life. He never would have compromised in the first place if it were not because Belinda had insisted on choosing Ariana to be his future wife. Last night, Ariana announced that she was breaking off their engagement. She even slapped Brian after that. She had clearly hurt Brian's pride and dignity, so there was no way he would still want to proceed with the engagement. Thank goodness. That's wonderful news. Gwen appeared extremely relieved as she patted her chest. I thought Mr. Lodge would be angry about it. Thankfully, he's going to overlook it. Ari, you should head over to the Lodge residence now and apologize to Mr. Lodge. I'm sure he'll let it pass this time. You should go and apologize to him yourself if you want, Ms. Lambert. I'm not getting engaged to him. Gwen was very displeased with Ariana's attitude of indifference. Why are you being so immature? With your father gone now, how are we going to make sure the Tory family will continue to prosper if we don't rely on the Lodge family? Ariana's expression hardened. During her previous life, Ariana was in her weakest, most vulnerable mental state when her father passed away. It was also at that time Brian had lent the Tory family a helping hand. Using that as an excuse, Gwen kept telling Ariana over and over again that Brian was interested in her. Slowly, Ariana fell for Brian. It was only later on Ariana found out that Brian had helped their family because she had some resemblance to Evelyn. Unfortunately, Ariana was already so deeply in love with Brian at that point. She even believed Gwen's words and tried to please Brian by becoming a substitute for Evelyn. Back then, she had a naive belief that she could someday win Brian's heart. Ariana found herself hilarious and pathetic as she thought about it now. Don't worry, Ms. Lambert. My father had worked hard to build this legacy for the Tory family. I won't allow it to be met with its downfall. If you still think we need the Lodge family, you can try giving it a shot yourself. Ariana went upstairs after saying that. How could you say something like that? I was only saying these things for our family's sake. You're just a young woman. How would you know how to manage a company? It would be better for you to marry a wealthy husband and be a stay-at-home wife. Ariana ignored Gwen's angry shouts coming from behind her. Gwen wanted her to marry Brian so that her son could become the Tory family's successor. Moreover, Ariana's status as the future Mrs. Lodge would be very useful to them. However, Tory company was the legacy Ariana's father had left for her. Ariana would not be as dumb as she was in her past life and hand over Tory company to the ungrateful, unscrupulous mother and son duo. The next morning, Brian came downstairs and saw that a maid was packing some things up. He frowned. What are you doing? Mr. Lodge, These are Miss Tori's belongings. She called yesterday and said that she would not be visiting anymore. So, she asked us to pack her things and have them delivered to her. An image of Ariana came to his mind as Brian looked at the suitcase in front of him. Usually, Ariana would have finished preparing breakfast at this hour and would be waiting for him to come downstairs expectantly. She would pull the chair out for him and try to bring up some random topics to initiate the conversation. Curiously, Brian felt as though something was missing when he did not see Ariana here today. When he realized he was thinking of her, Brian said frigidly, "Hurry and pack them all up then. Don't leave them lying around in the house." "Understood, Mr. Lodge." Brian sat at the dining table and found that there was nothing on the table. He asked in a displeased tone, "Is breakfast still not ready?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Lodge. Usually, Miss Tori would be preparing breakfast at this hour. However, our new helper is still not used to her working hours. Hurry up. I need to leave for work soon." Brian checked his watch. He was suddenly feeling quite frustrated. Soon enough, the helper served a platter of eggs, toast, and sausages at the table. Brian stared at the simple breakfast and cast the helper a sideways glance. "What is this? Breakfast?" The helper was a little scared. She could not understand what she had done wrong. Brian responded monotonously, "I don't eat sunny side ups and I don't take meat in the morning. Am I paying you $20,000 a month just for you to make something like this for me?" I'm sorry, Mr. Lodge. I had no idea." "Mr. Lodge, she's a new hire. I'll have her prepare something else right away." "It's all right." Brian had a grim expression on his face as he stood up. Belinda came out of her bedroom just then. She could tell why Brian was upset with just a glance at the items on the table. She began. "Ariana would usually make everything from scratch for breakfast. She'd start preparing those special delicacies at 4 a.m. and cook them on slow fire. She would have at least 16 types of nutritious dishes ready in the morning. Life is not going to be the same anymore with her gone." Brian knitted his brows. "She's the one who wants to break off the engagement. She can leave if she wants. Ariana Tori has only been at our house for 3 months. It's not like my life is going to fall apart just because she's gone now." Brian scoffed inwardly. "Grandma, I'm going to work. Come back here." Belinda frowned. "I don't care what you think. Ariana is the only person I'll ever acknowledge as your wife. Head to the Tori residence now and apologize to her. Don't bother coming home if Ariana refuses to forgive you. Grandma, go now." Belinda's words were final. Brian had to do as she said, albeit his reluctance. "All right." Meanwhile, at the Tori residence, bang, with a loud crash, Ariana's bedroom door was kicked open from the outside. Igor Tori was positively fuming as he yanked Ariana's blanket off her body and grabbed her wrist. "Ariana Tori, have you gone crazy? Did you break off your engagement to Brian? Get out of bed and explain yourself." Ariana stared at her left wrist, which was caught in Igor's grip. A small frown creased her forehead. Even though she called Igor her younger brother, he was not actually Ariana's father's biological son. Igor was already 5 when Gwen married her father. Ariana's father treated Igor as if he was his own. As the youngest member of the Tori family, Igor was spoiled rotten by Gwen. In Ariana's last life, Gwen had managed to persuade her into marrying into the Lodge family and handing over the task of managing the Tori company to Igor. Yet, Igor was the reason their company had eventually faced ruin. Ariana's anger flared up as she looked at the rebellious young man who was only 18. She threw a slap on his face the next instant. Igor was momentarily stunned. He stared at Ariana in disbelief. You dared to hit me." Ariana had always been a pushover, and she would always gently speak to Igor. Yet, she had actually hit him this time. Ariana said coldly and sternly, "Yes, I just hit you. Who gave you the right to barge into my room like this?" "Ms. Ariana, it was my fault. I didn't manage to stop Mr. Igor." A maid looked frightened as she stood by the door and explained, "Shut up. This is my home. I can be wherever I want to be." Igor yelled at the maid, who was shivering in fear. Ariana could tell how obnoxious Igor was just by looking at the bruises on the maid's arms. She had given all of her attention to Brian in the past, so Ariana failed to realize how Gwen and Igor had created various issues at home. "Your home? The Tori residence isn't yours yet, Igor." Ariana got up and walked over to the maid. She helped the maid stand straight. There were marks and bruises of different sizes scattered all over her arms. Yet, the maid dared not utter a word of it. The Tory family is wealthy, but we're not people who think we're above the law. Is there any labor law that allows you to hit your maid? The maid burst into tears when she realized Ariana was standing up for her. She had wanted to leave this place for a long time. However, Igor had used his status as the Tory family's young master to threaten her. He warned her not to tell anyone what he did to her and refused to let her quit. The maid had had enough of these torturous days. "Ms. Ariana, please let me leave." The maid sobbed uncontrollably. Gwen, who was downstairs, picked up on the commotion at around that time. She quickly went upstairs. Gwen could tell what happened the instant she spotted Igor's red and swollen cheek. She raised her brows and widened her eyes. Then, Gwen pointed at Ariana and shouted furiously, "How could you hit your own brother, Ariana? Have you really gone mad? First you broke off the engagement. Now you're hitting your family. What on earth are you trying to do? Brother. I, Ariana Tory, don't have a rude and impudent brother like him." Ariana continued in a frigid tone. "Ms. Lambert, bluntly speaking, Igor is not my dad's biological son. Also, he's officially an adult now. Not only did he barge into my room without permission, but Igor had also subjected the maid to verbal and physical abuse. Look at him. That's the great son you've raised." Gwen scoffed. "Igor has been living here since he was still a kid. Your dad saw him like he was his own. As Igor's sister, did you have to be so particular with those things now? Besides, what's the big deal with him hitting a maid? It's not like we haven't paid for her medical treatment and monthly pay." Ariana's eyes hardened. "Miss Lambert, if Igor can do these things to a maid now, there's a good chance he'll treat our company's employees poorly in the future. Igor's probably going to ruin the company if I hand over the Tory company to him." "Ariana, you're making hasty judgments now. Igor is still young. It's not like people are born naturally as successful business owners. Besides, you've promised to transfer the company's ownership to Igor. You can't go back on your words just because you can't marry Mr. Lodge now." Ariana knew all along how naive and careless Gwen was sometimes. She snickered and walked over to the desk. Then, Ariana took the equity transfer agreement she had signed before the engagement party out of the drawer. "Were you talking about this, Ms. Lambert?"